billion reasons, Mr. President. There's 2.2 billion reasons to vote against this tax bill. There's 2.2 billion reasons to send it back to conference committee. I support Senator Weber's motion to do so. We have, Mr. President, $19 billion of overcollection of the people's money arriving here in St. Paul between now and the end of the biennium that ends in just a few short days. 2.2 billion reasons in this bill to vote no. This is a bill, and Senator Rest had a title for it, and I used to serve with Representative Davids, and he had some really good titles. I didn't, Senator Rest, I like you a lot. You're a great colleague, but I didn't like the title. I've got a better one. This is the Rob Peter to pay Paul tax bill. And that's what we have before us, Mr. President. A bill that takes $2.2 billion from Peter and pays it to Paul. It takes $2.2 billion from hardworking Minnesotans and pays it to Paul. That's what we have before us. So we had Democrats, we had at least 4 of them in this chamber that very clearly said during their campaign that they wanted to eliminate the income tax on Social Security payments. And they campaigned on it, and they begged for votes and told people in their district that they were going to come to St. Paul and they weren't going to stop until the income tax on Social Security payments was eliminated. Well, guess what, Mr. President? It didn't happen. And Senate Republicans offered those 4 members multiple opportunities to join us to eliminate the income tax on Social Security payments. As a matter of fact, there's plenty of money. There's way more money being collected here by the hardworking people of Minnesota than was needed to fully eliminate the income tax on Social Security benefits. But no, the party bosses told those 4 members, the Democrat party bosses told them, no, you're not going to do it. You're going to vote with us. And what did they do? They voted with the party bosses each and every single time that we attempted. And we worked it over and over and tried over and over in this body to get rid of the income tax on Social Security benefits. And those 4 Democrats voted with their party bosses instead of the people that they told at the doors that they were going to work with us to do it. There was no bipartisan effort by them to do it. It was march in line, and march in line, Mr. President, they did. So what do we see in the bill? The best they could do in the bill, with the billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of overcollection of the people's money, the best they could do is 39%. This bill gets rid of 39% of the $2.6 billion that this state takes from senior citizens throughout our state and robs from Peter to bring it to St. Paul so that the Democrats can redistribute it to people, that robs from Peter, and so that the Democrats can bring it here to St. Paul to pay to Paul. And that's what this bill does. Let's look, Mr. President, at the working family credit as an example. Now this bill, and I'm still trying to understand it completely because we didn't have a full hearing of all of what happened in this bill in conference committee. There's a huge House component in here around the working family credit. They reconditioned the working family credit to expand eligibility. As a matter of fact, eligibility, I am told, and I see in the spreadsheet, increases $800 million. We take $800 million of Peter's money and give it to the working family credit. That's what we do in this bill, $800 million per biennium, every single biennium. So I pulled together some numbers on the working family credit, members. before the changes in this bill are implemented, the working family credit, so members, the working family credit is a refundable tax credit. That means when you're done calculating your tax liability, if you have zero tax liability, you still get a check. If you don't have to pay in taxes to the government, Mr. President, the working family credit allows you to get a check that Peter earned and St. Paul took from Peter to pay to Paul. $640 per filer currently is the amount of the working family credit, and that is before this bill adds another $800 million per biennium. By the way, the current spending in the working family credit, Mr. President, is about $253 million per year. So that's about $500 million per biennium, $253 million per year. And, you know, for liberals who argue that, well, we need to take from Peter to pay to St. Paul, or we need to take from Peter to pay Paul. Those people, those Democrats who argue, take money from productive people and give it to people who are not productive, those people who argue that suggest, well, you know, that's in the common interest, that's in the public good, that is going to help liberate and get people up and out of poverty, to give them a hand up. Well, Mr. President, this program has become nothing more than a hammock, and the Democrats add another $800 million per biennium to the already large hammock in the working family credit. As a matter of fact, it's projected before this bill comes forward, Mr. President, it's expected to increase 4.3% between last year and this year, another 2.1. It's supposed to increase 2.1% every single year, Mr. President. That's what the working family credit is scheduled to increase. It is not liberating people from poverty. It is instead increasing the size and scope of welfare here in the state of Minnesota. It is not encouraging people to get a job. It is instead encouraging them not to. And we've seen that over and over again in other bills here, Mr. President. We paid people not to work in the jobs bill. We paid them in a bunch of different bills. We're doing this by robbing Peter to pay Paul, and we do it in this bill. Very, very frustrating, I think, for hardworking Minnesotans who understood we were going to give them a tax cut. But instead, what this is taking money from people who work hard and giving it to people who the Democrats want to give it to, certainly their constituents that they have outlined in these bills. So, by the way, the working family credit members, among the 393,300 filers that have filed for this in the last year, 20% have a positive tax liability after all of their refundable and non-refundable credits are applied. 20% have to pay in taxes. 80% of the people who are going to be paid this money don't have net tax liability after the tax credits are applied. The people who work hard in Minnesota, Mr. President, are becoming weary. The people who work so hard in Minnesota and are having St. Paul rob from Peter, like this bill does, are becoming weary. And I've covered in other bills, they are moving out of Minnesota because they can't handle the oppressive nature of taxes, regulation, and liberal woke ideology in this state, and we see it in these bills over and over and over again. Our state, Mr. President, is becoming fatigued. This bill increases the fatigue even more among the people of Minnesota who work so hard every day to try to keep their families going, to try to build their communities, to try to bring our state forward. And they're running out of steam, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, I encourage you to support Senator Weber's motion. Let's stop the $2.2 billion reasons in this bill. Let's stop the efforts in this bill that rob from the hardworking Minnesotans, that rob from Peter to pay Paul. Thank you, Mr. President.